Thank you so much. And I am equally thrilled to be here. I love the theme of this conference, Work Without Limits. It is a perfect tee up for what we're about to discuss today, which is how to find opportunity and resilience in this world of the future of work that we're living in. I want to start out, obviously a lot has happened in this world, and we're starting to look at the world as sort of pre-COVID-19 and hopefully very soon post-COVID-19. I know we're all hoping for that. But the reality is that pre-COVID-19, before it really started to come into our world, we were really seeing several trends that were indicating a shift into the future of work. And when we think about the future of work, we think about it through three distinct lenses. And I'm putting up a triangle with my hands because that's actually what we draw. And those three pieces are the work, the workforce, and the workplace. And as we think about what's been going on over the past year or so, we're seeing acceleration in all three of those areas. As it relates to the work itself, there is no question that automation is here and here to stay, and it is impacting jobs in a very significant way. And as you could see on the slide, there was a statistic that said that 20 million jobs in manufacturing were going to be replaced by automation by 2030. Now, I don't subscribe to the view that robots are coming and they're going to take all of our jobs, but I think it does signal that work is going to change pretty significantly. This second statistic here on the slide, I find particularly relevant because it talks about the fact that 65% of children entering into primary school are going to be in a job that does not exist today. And as a mom, a relatively new mom, I have a 22-month-old son, this statistic really resonates with me and I think gives a view as to how quickly the jobs and work are really shifting and have been shifting. As it relates to the workforce, we see the same thing. We've continued to see the emergence of the gig economy as a huge component of the workforce moving forward. And this statistic, 77 million freelancers in major markets around the world, really gives us a sense of the volume of uptick of the gig economy and using these different workforce models in order to get work done in the future. And we're seeing organizations respond. Because organizations here, there was a study that showed that 84% of organizations are increasing their investments in reskilling and retraining, a recognition that not only is the work shifting and has been shifting, but the workforce is shifting as well. And then finally, as we think about the third leg of the stool, the workplace, we're seeing significant shifts as well. And keep in mind, these statistics were pre-COVID-19. We were still seeing a major uptick in working from home. This shows a significant percentage increase from 2005 to right before COVID-19 in the use of working from home as a model for the workplace, how to get work done. And the good news is that employee engagement has been shown to be the highest amongst those workers that work from home 60 to 80% of the time. This was all prior to COVID-19. Again, we were starting to see that acceleration into the future of work. COVID-19 has accelerated that even further. And I think we've all seen the implications of the pandemic really shift us and accelerate us into the future of work even more. There was a study that said that 3 out of every 4 CFOs are now saying that at least 20% of their workforce will remain virtual. That is a staggering statistic when we think about how CFOs would have viewed their workforce prior to COVID-19. And then, of course, we have the market dynamics. Upwork, we're here at Upwork's conference, increase in stock price significant. Same thing for Zoom, because we're seeing this incredible uptake of these technologies. And we're also seeing employees be able to respond and have confidence in their ability to work remotely. Not just the younger generation, but workers of all ages are having a high degree of confidence that they can work remotely. So, is it all good? Have we just transitioned to the future of work? We're here, we don't have to worry about it, let's move on. Not really, because along with those positive benefits, we are seeing some negative consequences. A Bloomberg study just came out last week, and I found it to be fascinating, although not surprising, which is that the average workday has increased by 48.5 minutes. And that's on top of a lengthy workday already. So the workday is getting longer. And then that same study showed that there's a 13% increase in meetings. I don't know about you, but every day I wake up, I go to the same spot, my dining room table, which is where I'm sitting right now because I don't have a home office. And I find that my calendar is meeting, 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 meeting. And I try to inject 5-minute breaks just to give myself just a moment to not constantly be on meetings. So no surprise that the percentage of meetings is going up, but also we're experiencing what many of us have come to know as Zoom fatigue, right? We're tired of constantly being on video. I think most organizations are frankly behind in setting real policies around exactly when Zoom should be used, giving guidance to workers to help them understand when it's acceptable to turn that camera off and when it's not. On top of that, well-being has become a huge issue. I'm going to be talking about our global human capital trend study shortly, and well-being was actually our #1 trend this year. And these are some pretty sobering statistics that working mothers and working fathers are seeing that their mental health is deteriorating during the pandemic. And frankly, I don't know if that is going to subside anytime soon, given the school reopenings and what's been happening there. The reason why, there are many reasons, and you could see this chart shows some of them, but whether it's having a lack of focus, too many distractions, feeling isolated, you're at home, you can't connect with others, or just this sense that work and life are blurring and it's hard to understand where the lines of demarcation are. There are unintended consequences to this acceleration into the future of work that we really need to start to manage. And that gives me a lot of reflection because I think about, why are all these unintended consequences happening? We need to accelerate into the future of work. There's no question around it. But what is going on and how can we mitigate some of these unintended consequences? And as we really look at what's happened, especially in light of the pandemic, a lot of the changes in the future of work have been driven primarily through technology. We put Zoom in place. We said, we need to work remotely. We give you Zoom and it solves the issue, right? Or, we need work to be done more efficiently. So let's put in some robotics and automation and get it done. And that's frankly been the way that we've sort of looked at changes to work for quite a while. From the invention of the printing press to the phone to the personal computer, it's been about, let's use technology and let's use that technology to do work differently. I'm going to suggest a change to that, because the reality is that not only does that approach have unintended consequences like we just showed on the prior slide, but it has a significant impact on a metric that matters to all of us, whether we're in HR, IT, finance, in the business. We all care about productivity because productivity has a direct line impact to the bottom line. And this chart, I think, really does a great job contextualizing what is happening as it relates to productivity. And as you can see, productivity is either declining or stagnating, especially over the past decade, which is a little bit confusing because we've had all this great technology. I mean, we're in the 4th industrial revolution. We've had an explosion of technologies like we've never had before. The digital revolution is here, yet we're not seeing that translate into the productivity gains we expect. Not in mature markets, but also not in emerging markets either. If you follow that white line, what you'll see is emerging markets did get a bump in productivity, but they've already started to lose those gains over the past decade. And that's why I believe there needs to be a different approach. And that approach all centers on the work itself. When we think about the use of technology in accelerating the future of work, we often look at technology as a substitution strategy. I have work, I do work today, I'm going to do that same work tomorrow, but in tomorrow's world, I'm going to substitute technology to do that work instead of humans. That's the substitution effect. And what that does is it allows us to reduce cost, and it results in efficiency gains. But efficiency gains are not the same as productivity gains. If we really want to move up this curve, if we want to move from efficiency to productivity and ultimately to growth and to value, we need to look at technology and work differently. We can't look at technology as a way of just substituting the way work gets done. We need to fundamentally change the way we're doing work. Or in our language, we need to re-architect the work. And we need to re-architect the work with a human focus. We need to recognize that humans don't work in the same way as machines. We don't necessarily start our day and think, well, I'm going to do step one, and then I'm going to do step two, and then I'm going to do step three. We work in a much more fluid manner. And so it's not about architecting work for the sake of humans instead of technology. It's about architecting work to align to the way humans work using the technology that's available. And that is how we believe we will turn that productivity curve and really help to accelerate the path into the future of work and mitigate those unintended consequences that I talked about earlier. So what does it mean to re-architect work in a human way? What does it mean to re-architect work that allows us to focus on enabling humans to do what they do best? Well, when we think about work and the way humans work, we could see that we work in very different ways. As I said, we don't work in a process-based linear way. Step one, step two, step three. I don't know about you, but that's not the way I start my day. Within my day, as I execute my work, I focus on a lot of collaboration and teaming. I make sure that I'm not just working within my team, that would be my team on the org chart, but I'm working across functional silos. I work in different ways depending on the work I need to accomplish, and I might work different than my colleague works. Sometimes my colleagues might do everything on a mobile device, whereas I like to have my PC in front of me. Frankly, and this isn't much for the technologist in me, a lot of times I still write with pen and paper, but it's personalized to me. And then as I'm working, I need to make sure that I have the ability to share knowledge, to create knowledge with others as I'm doing that work, and then always to have a focus on my personal well-being. That's essential, because in today's world, it's not like well-being is some separate issue that I have to worry about distinctly. Well-being is something that I have to consider in the context of the work that I'm doing every single day. The way that we need to do that, as I mentioned earlier, is still using technology, but using it in a different way. You could see the difference between these two charts that I'm showing here. The chart on the left is what we find in most organizations today, that we have all these different systems that give us all these capabilities to do work differently, but they're not organized, they're not architected in a way that aligns to how I do the work. What we need to do moving forward is to put work in the center, to start by asking ourselves, what is the work we're doing? Why are we doing it? And how should we do it? And then to think about how all the capabilities, the technical capabilities that exist, whether it's regard to collaboration, communication, knowledge sharing, file storage, AI, robotics, those are all incredible capabilities. But how do we bring them together? How do we architect them around the work that we need to accomplish tomorrow? When we ask that question, we have the ability to fundamentally change not just how work gets done, but what work is getting done, and align work to how humans do that work, bringing together those human and those technical capabilities and making that impact on productivity. That, to me, is the vision of what we can accomplish in the future of work. And frankly, that's what gets me excited to get out of bed every day and help consult to organizations to try to figure out this particular puzzle, because I believe that work is an incredibly powerful force that we can use to drive innovation, creativity, collaboration, relationship building, and really bring meaning back to the workplace. This is the topic that we really hit upon in this year's Global Human Capital Trends Report. I just want to give some context on that report. I hope many of you have heard about it, but for those who haven't, we have been producing the Global Human Capital Trends Report at Deloitte for 10 years. This was actually our 10th annual report. It is the largest longitudinal study of human capital issues in the world. And I think what really makes this study unique is that it's based on a survey. This year, we had 9,000 respondents to our survey across 119 countries. So this truly represents a global view. And the survey is not just completed by HR professionals, it's completed by business professionals. In fact, 1,500 of our 9,000 respondents were C-suite level or above. And so it really gives us a business view of what's going on in human capital. And in this year's report, we tackle this fundamental question, which is, how can we remain distinctly human in a technology-driven world? How can we make sure that as we're thinking about work, we're architecting it to reflect the way that humans actually work, recognizing that technology will continue to play an incredibly important role. But we need to look at technology not as that substitution strategy that I showed you in that chart earlier, but as a collaboration strategy, the bringing together of technical capabilities and human capabilities to really move the world of work forward. In our trends report, we highlight 10 trends chapters. And today I didn't have time to go through all 10, but I did want to walk through 6 chapters in particular. I'm actually going to hit a little bit on the 7th chapter later, but 6 core chapters that I think really talk about this concept of how we can bring the human side to the forefront and remain distinctly human through work itself. The anchor point of our report is this idea that in order to remain distinctly human, organizations need to build and embrace a new set of DNA. And there were 3 characteristics of DNA that we identified in the report, and you can see them here: purpose, potential, and perspective. When we talk about purpose, and purpose is, I feel like it's the word of the decade, frankly. Everyone's talking about purpose. The Business Roundtable, which is a pretty powerful group of CEOs, just a little over a year ago, redefined the definition of an organization's purpose and expanded it to be beyond generating profit for shareholders to caring for the broader set of stakeholders. But when we talk about purpose, we're not talking about lofty mission statements or value statements. We're talking about how you create a better connection between the individuals and the work that they're doing, the teams that they're working with, and the organization itself. It's about really creating that sense of meaning for workers. When we talk about potential, we're talking about capitalizing on what workers have the ability to do, recognizing that it can't just only be about what is listed on their resume, but that we have to anchor our workforce programs and strategies based on an individual's potential. I mean, we've been through the pandemic. It's now been 8 months, hard to believe. It's really been 8 months in earnest, I guess, since we've been in the pandemic, or at least knew it was coming. And I think we've seen human potential sometimes at its best. We've seen workers be able to transition almost instantaneously to remote work. We've seen workers take on new roles. We've seen workers transition into new sectors or industries. And I think it's really reminded us that human potential is so strong. So how can we really capitalize on that moving forward? There is nothing more distinctly human than an individual's potential to work at their best. And then the last attribute, the last characteristic of DNA is that of perspective. The world is uncertain. Nothing's going to change that. No matter how many keynotes you listen to, the world is uncertain. We don't know all the answers. But now more than ever, we need an informed perspective about work, about our culture, about the workforce to be able to make bold decisions moving forward. And so we need to find ways to gain insights to be able to form that perspective and make those bold decisions. So these are the 3 DNA: purpose, potential, and perspective that we believe are critical for organizations to embrace if they want to remain distinctly human. And as you'll see through the chart here, work is a stream that runs across them. Because in order to truly embrace purpose, potential, and perspective, you need to use work as a powerful force, because that is something that all of us are doing every single day. If we architect work, if we think about how to architect work in a human way to bring forward those human ways of working as we reimagine what the work should be of the future, not only will we have the ability to accelerate into the future of work, but we will have the ability to really bring forth these attributes and remain distinctly human. And that will be the way we turn that productivity curve. So let's talk about the 6 trends chapters to help us think about how we might bring this to life. How do we bring these 3 attributes of purpose, potential, and perspective to life in the workplace? And you could see the 6 I'm going to talk through here. I want to start with the first one, which is belonging. And belonging was actually our number 2 trend this year. Our number 1 trend was well-being, and I'll talk about that next. But as it relates to belonging, there were some interesting statistics. So 79%, this is a vast majority of our 9,000 respondents, said fostering a sense of belonging is critical over the next 12 to 18 months. Even more important than that, 93% said fostering a sense of belonging drives organizational performance. So there is a clear link between a feeling that you belong and organizational performance. That's critical. But like many of our trends this year, a small percentage believe they're ready to actually address this trend. So in our belonging trend, we really talk about, and the title of our trend is the shift from comfort to connection to contribution. What we found is that most organizations, when they define belonging, they focus on this sense of comfort. Helping workers feel that they can bring their authentic self to work is often how it's portrayed. But if we really want to create this sense of belonging and purpose and translate it to meaning, then we have to do more than foster a sense of comfort. We need to create that sense of connection between the individual and the work they are doing, the individual and the team that they are working with, and the individual and the organization's mission. And in order to do that, we need to really focus on the individual's contributions. Because what an individual contributes, that is so human, what I am contributing every day. If we can create that tie between their contribution at work to what the organization is trying to achieve, that's how you create that sense of belonging, and that will translate into improved performance moving forward. So that's our chapter on belonging. Let me move to the next trend that I wanted to talk about, which is well-being. And as I mentioned, this was our #1 trend. And there is no doubt that well-being is a hot topic right now. As I mentioned earlier, working mothers, working fathers, mental well-being is becoming a massive issue for individuals. And I think that's why this rose, frankly, to the #1 trend this year. 96% of our respondents said that well-being is an organizational responsibility. It's not a government responsibility. It's not a society responsibility. This is a responsibility of organizations. And 80% say it's important. Similar to belonging, this is a vast majority saying that it's absolutely critical for the next 12 to 18 months. But a large percentage are reporting that well-being is not designed and integrated into the work itself. And this is where that connection to re-architecting work comes into play. We find that organizations are investing millions, if not tens of millions, if not more, into well-being programs. But the well-being programs are on the side. So it's sort of like I do my work every day, and then if I need help with my physical well-being or financial well-being or my mental well-being, I go over and I dip into a bunch of programs that exist over here. Well, what if instead we actually architected work so that well-being was integrated into the work itself? That can happen through the way that we structure meetings, through the way that we compose teams, through the way that we schedule work. There are many different tactics that we can use to actually design and architect work to focus on well-being. And given that it's such a critical issue, we think this is incredibly important moving forward. If we re-architect work to focus on well-being, we are taking work and architecting it to focus on what is human, what is personal to me, my well-being that I have every single day. And again, we believe that will translate, just like belonging, that will translate to the bottom line, to that productivity. Now, well-being and belonging are tied to this concept of purpose, that attribute of purpose, because they're about taking something that's very individual, my personal contribution, my well-being, and tying it to the organization through work. That's how we believe that organizations can start to embrace this attribute of purpose. The next 3 trends I'm going to talk about relate to potential. And the first one that I want to talk about is super teams. Super teams is actually a concept that we introduced. Actually, super jobs is a concept that we introduced last year in our trends report that you might be familiar with. But it's all about how we can use the power of AI. Last year was about to transform jobs, to expand the responsibility of jobs. This year, it's about how to expand the power of teams. We all know that organizations are employing teams more now than ever before. But we need to make sure that those teams are really working in a collaborative way with AI. Again, going back to that chart earlier, we don't want to use AI just to substitute humans in the context of doing work. We want to leverage the capability of AI in order to create true collaboration between humans and machines to maximize the potential of what AI can provide. And the good news is that organizations are either exploring or using AI. 70% of our 9,000 respondents said they are exploring or using AI right now. And even better news, this statistic here, only 12% of organizations are using AI to replace workers. So they're not focused just on that substitution mode. However, 55% are using AI just to focus on consistency and quality. So they're using it to assist workers, but that's not really the goal of super teams. If we really want to maximize the potential of technology like AI, we have to use the AI in a collaborative manner to bring together those human and technology capabilities to architect work so that the AI capabilities are at the forefront, so that AI and humans can operate as one team working together. That is the vision of super teams and what we believe will allow us, again, to remain distinctly human in this technology-focused world. The next trend under potential is knowledge management, and knowledge management is certainly a tried and true topic that I'm sure all of you know about. But frankly, this is the first year we've actually brought it into the human capital trends. And that's because we believe that knowledge is the new currency, right? It's what's absolutely critical in organizations, especially as we see the shifts in the workforce, the increase in the gig economy, people moving between jobs. Knowledge is so important. But most of our survey respondents view knowledge management in a very traditional way. They view it as the simple sharing and dissemination of knowledge. You could see here, that's how 55% of our respondents define it. And very few of our respondents say that they're incorporating AI into their knowledge management strategy. So there's still work to be done. Because when we talk about knowledge management, we're talking about how you can create knowledge, how you can use knowledge creation to create a connected world. If we think about it in the context of the work itself, what if when we re-architected work, we injected knowledge management? So as you're going through your day and executing your work, it becomes natural for you to create knowledge to share with others. Because that's naturally what we do as humans, but we need to make sure that we bring that capability into the design of work itself. Our final trend under potential is what we call beyond reskilling. I mentioned earlier, I think I showed a statistic that 85% of organizations are investing in reskilling or retraining. That's fantastic. Okay, it's fantastic. But is the investment enough? Our Human Capital Trends survey shows maybe not. While 53%, a majority of our respondents are saying that between 50 to 100% of their workforce are going to need to change their skills in the next 3 years. So that's significant. Only 17% say that they even know what those skills are. By the way, I'd love to know who those 17% are, because I think it's pretty hard to predict what those skills are. But even more jarring, only 16% are planning a significant investment increase. So even though they're investing, the investment is not enough. And to me, it's like being on a hamster wheel. As the half-life of skills continues to decline, we keep reskilling people, they need new skills, we reskill them again. The investment's not enough to keep up, and so where do you go from there? So we believe we need to shift from this concept of reskilling to building resilience, to focusing on those human capabilities that will cut across different roles as the jobs continue to change, to give people a sense of confidence that they will be able to have that long career life. If people are living to 100, they may work for 50 years. How do we give them the confidence that they're going to have the capabilities to last that long in the work world? And how do we build that resilience? And how do we do it in the context of the work itself? How do we design work so that we constantly focus on helping workers build those capabilities that will give them resilience for the future? When I talk about those capabilities, it's everything from relationship building to customer experience, from lots of data from lots of different sources. These are capabilities that are going to be needed in the future, regardless of how the jobs evolve. So how can we re-architect work to focus on bringing those capabilities to the forefront and allow humans to have that level of resilience that they will need to navigate a much longer career timeline than they've ever faced before? The final trend chapter that I want to cover is as it relates to perspective, that third attribute that I talked about. We covered purpose, we covered potential, now we want to cover perspective. And as I talked about, perspective is all about recognizing that there's uncertainty in the world ahead, but we need insights that are going to allow us to make bold decisions moving forward. And we wrote a chapter called Governing Workforce Strategies, New Questions for Better Results, to deal with this issue. Because what we found, and you could see the statistics here, is despite the fact that there has been so much progress on workforce and people analytics, that 97% of our respondents, so this is basically everyone, said they need more. And 53% said their leaders' interest in workforce-related information has only increased. But unfortunately, only 11%, so only 1 in 10 out of every one of our respondents said they're producing these workforce insights in real time. Even with all this technology and all this data available, we're not quite cracking the nut. And we believe that's because we need to start asking different questions. In this chapter, we actually highlight the 12 questions that we believe organizations need to start asking themselves if they really want to get a pulse on what's happening with the workforce, and culture. And when you do that, that's the kind of insight that you need to be able to re-architect work, to put the human needs front and center. Again, not humans over technology, but a human focus to be able to take advantage of all this technology that's now at our fingertips. So I took you through these 6 trends and adopting these 3 characteristics of purpose, potential, and perspective. And I said, hey, we need to re-architect work if we want to move the productivity curve upwards. It's not that simple. And by the way, it's not an HR issue alone. I know many of you in the audience are in HR, many of you are not. And the reality is that back in 2018, we coined a term that we called the symphonic C-suite. And what we talked about at that point was that the issues that were facing organizations, whether it was the move to become digital, whether it was the transition to the future of work, whether it's the issues like we're facing today around social injustice, we can no longer operate in functional silos, having everyone do the work that only exists within their silo. We can't have a world where finance only cares about the financials and IT only cares about the technology and HR only cares about the people. That just doesn't work with the complexity of the issues we're facing today. And this is no different. If we want to tackle the issues, if we want to embrace these DNA of purpose, potential, and perspective, we need the full enterprise to work together. But someone needs to lead. And I don't think there is a better opportunity right now than for HR to take the lead. And here's why. The last chapter in our Human Capital Trends report is called A Memo to HR. We wrote a personal letter to HR to say, here's what we're seeing, because HR has been our biggest reader of this report and one of our biggest stakeholders for a decade. And what we found was some really good news. 93% of our respondents said they believe HR will remain a distinct function. This is despite all the talk that HR is going to go away. There is a strong belief that HR will remain. But 55% are asking for a significant change in short order. And 63% are either not confident in HR's ability to make that change or only somewhat confident. So this to me is a call to action. How can HR lead the symphonic C-suite or the symphonic organization to think about this challenge of remaining distinctly human in a technology-driven world? How can HR take the lead on owning this topic of work and thinking about how to re-architect work to align to how humans actually do work, leveraging all this phenomenal technology that's at our fingertips? How can HR help us and help the organization embrace these characteristics of purpose, potential, and perspective to prepare workers for the future of work, to make sure that they have the resiliency that's going to be needed, and to play the role that organizations need to play today, which is to be a social enterprise, to not just focus on the shareholders' profit, but to focus on the broader set of stakeholders, the customers, the employees, the suppliers, the communities in which we serve, and society overall. That's the opportunity that's in front of us right now. And the opportunity is right here. I wanted to end on this quote from Anne Marie Slaughter. which you could see here on the screen, that the coronavirus and its fallout is a time machine to the future. Changes that we predicted would take decades are happening in the span of weeks. We are in a world that's accelerating and moving quickly. The future of work was happening before COVID-19, but it is here right now. The question for all of us is how we take advantage of it. We believe work is central to being able to do that. And we believe that by architecting work, by focusing on humans, by remaining distinctly human and embracing technology, by putting in place DNA that focus on connecting individuals to work and the organization through purpose, looking at workers not based on what they have done, but what they have the ability to do, capitalizing on their potential, and having the insights and data that gives us that forward-looking perspective. That's how we're going to be able to make that transition, accelerate into the future of work in a way that's not only going to allow us to create more efficiency, but to drive the productivity gains that all of us expect to see.